Hyperliquid is the only altcoin worth buying in 2025. Good evening, ladies. In today's video, we're going to be doing an update on the fundamentals of Hyperliquid and what makes it such an interesting play, because it's still looking really strong on a fundamentals basis. As well as that, I want to go over an update on the Hyper EVM, which has launched recently and is exploding in TVL. And I want to show you how exactly you can farm it, an update of some new ways you can farm the Hyper EVM, which I think is definitely worth doing. So with all that said, let's get cracking. Quick video for you today. So just as a refresher on why Hyperliquid is so interesting from a fundamentals basis, it is one of the only coins where there's no VCs, with this hidden sell pressure that you don't really think about, that you don't really see, and basically why every altcoin has been performing so terribly over the last couple of years. Hyperliquid doesn't have that whatsoever. The only sell pressure is coming from the airdrop farmers who got a massive airdrop last year. On top of that, the token actually has real fundamental value because a portion of the fees and revenue that Hyperliquid makes goes directly to buying back the Hype token on the open market, and I'm sure most of you know that, but here's just a little graph that you can see. But here's just a little graph that will help you visualize what this exactly means. So at the current price of $20 for Hyperliquid and the current revenue of 1.3 million per day, the Hype supply would be fully bought back within 8 years. Now obviously that's not going to happen because the price would go up in that scenario if there was no other sellers, so you can't buy back the entire supply. But that's just basically a PE ratio. So you can look at the different PE ratios. So you can say at this price, Hyperliquid will get bought back even faster because you can buy more of it with the same amount of revenue. And if you think the revenue is going to go up, it will get bought back faster. So that's just a nice little way to visualize the PE ratio of Hyperliquid. And the other nice thing about Hyperliquid is that basically all the fees that they charge, that is actual revenue for the ecosystem or for Hyperliquid itself. So if we look on DeFi Llama, we sort all the protocols by the top amount of fees. Hyperliquid's number 11 for today, top fees, and that's just an average day for Hyperliquid at the moment. Probably is potentially on the low end in comparison to what it usually does on 24-hour. So it's generating in the top 10 for fees usually, and it's actually in the top 5 for revenue because, like I said, so fees is what you actually charge the user, revenue is what the protocol itself keeps. As you can see, Hyperliquid is top 5 in protocol revenue out of every single protocol in the entire world, and basically all of this revenue goes back to buying that token. Not all of it, but like, for argument's sake, I think it's like 97% on average goes back to buying the token. So like on a price to earnings ratio, like we saw from that last chart, the price to earnings ratio of Hyperliquid is like 8. That's like the price to earnings ratio of the S&P 500 is like 20. So this protocol that's growing exponentially fast has basically dominated, is the black hole when it comes to on-chain perps, and is just taking market share from one of the biggest use cases of crypto, which is perpetual futures, and it has a price to earnings ratio of 8 at the moment. So it's just on a fundamentals basis super cheap when you paint it like that. And if you think institutional investment comes into crypto, these are the kind of tokens that they're probably going to be interested in. Now if you think retail are going to be coming into crypto, they're more interested in like speculative stuff like memes, NFTs, ordinals, stuff like that. But institutional guys with big money, they can really make an easy case to invest in something like Hyperliquid with crazy earnings that is going back on a fundamentals basis. It's like buybacks, like Apple. One of the reasons Apple has done so well over the last 15 years is because they did massive buybacks, billions and billions per year of Apple stock. And that's why it just went up only, because they made so much money and they used loads of that money to buy back the stock. Same thing's happening here with Hyperliquid over the long term, in my opinion. The other nice thing about this mechanism kind of adds a little bit more of a floor for the Hyperliquid price. So if you assume, which you can't assume, but let's just assume for argument's sake, that the revenue for Hyperliquid remains somewhat constant, even though hopefully over the longer term, you would hope that it would be growing over the long term. But let's just say, for argument's sake, the revenue remains constant, and now the Hyperliquid price drops. The Hyperliquid drops 50% or drops 70%. In those cases, the Hyperliquid Assistance Fund, basically the buybacks, are going to be buying back way more Hyperliquid with the same amount of revenue that they're generated. So they'll be able to buy, instead of buying one Hyperliquid token, they'll be able to buy two if it drops 50%, because they'll have the same amount of revenue. So it's like a nice DCA for Hyperliquid. Obviously, it also means Hyperliquid will also be buying the top if it explodes up. The Assistance Fund will be buying the top like Michael Saylor or something.
So you're buying?
Yeah, I'll be buying at the top forever.
But I think that could potentially help smooth out the volatility with Hyperliquid as well. So maybe that also is a bonus for institutional investors, which might not be coming in at this very moment in time. But just where do you think the future money is going to come from into crypto? I think most people realize that VC coins, like, that's obviously been a narrative for the last 2 years that they're going to zero, but yeah, a lot of them just not performing whatsoever, because finally people gave up in the fugazi of this random governance token having any value and VCs being up 100x and let's buy it for some reason. People stopped believing in that fugazi, so they're not performing anymore. Now people are kind of looking more at fundamentals. The thing that went live recently is the Hyperliquid staking tiers. So basically, if you hold a certain amount of Hyperliquid or the Hype token, if you stake that in the protocol, you're going to get a big discount on your trading fees, up to 40%. So if you're like a hedge fund, high frequency trading firm, and you're putting in a lot of transactions, or you have a lot of money, you're highly incentivized to buy and stake a lot of Hyperliquid, and you'll get a big discount on the amount of fees that you're paying. And even if you didn't stake any Hyperliquid, the fees charged by Hyperliquid are much, much less than Binance or other centralized competitors. So it's a better product overall. So that's essentially what's going on with the Perps platform on Hyperliquid, which is their main product. Now let's have a look at the Hyper EVM. So as a refresher, they've created their own layer 1 chain, Hyperliquid. And it's an EVM compatible chain. And it's super fast and it's super nice to use. So it kind of feels like using Sonic, if you've tried Sonic. So it's like EVM compatible. You can use MetaMask or another EVM chain like Rabby. And yeah, it's super fast and it's super fresh to use. So it hasn't fully proved, well, we were kind of asking in my last video, are people actually going to use this EVM chain? Do we really need another EVM chain? But if it does take off, obviously layer 1s generally get a massive premium over their earnings. I think like Solana is like a 500 PE. Ethereum, don't even get me started on the price to earnings ratio. So if you do have an adopted layer 1 chain, you're going to get a massive premium on your token price. So that's kind of what the other investment case for Hyperliquid is. So it already has the Perps platform, which by itself probably makes Hyperliquid undervalued on a fundamentals basis anyway, but then you could potentially stick on this multiplier effect when you have your own L1 chain, because Hyperliquid would be the gas token. So super fast, super cheap, and we have yet to see if it's going to take off. Well, let's see on this update. So in my last video, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago, the TVL in Hyperliquid in the layer 1 was 400 million, I believe, or even less. And now it's 840 million. So basically it's doubled the TVL over the course of a few weeks. So it's kind of exploding. So people are actually using this. Obviously, probably a lot of people are just using this to farm the airdrop, because it's probably, in my opinion, very likely that people who are using the EVM chain, who are using the Hyperliquid L1, are going to get a very nice or like a higher percentage of the airdrop than Perps platform potentially. So people who are trying out this EVM, trying out the different applications on it, like, I think that's very, very much a good idea in my opinion, because you know, Hyperliquid was so generous in the last airdrop. They're not going to be as generous, and there's definitely more users this time that the airdrop will be spread out between. But even still, it's still like still worth billions and billions of dollars. So even like a quarter of the size airdrop as the last time with 5 times the amount of users, like it's still going to be a decent airdrop. It's probably worth doing, in my opinion. Here we can see the revenue. This is the daily revenue in the blue bars, and then the purple line is the moving average of the revenue. So we can see that the revenue has taken a bit of a pullback here. So looking at the purple line here, we can see from the top when things were crazy in January and February, like the top of the markets when things were really, really volatile, the average was about 4 million, and now it's about just over 3 million. So about a 25% drop in the average revenue for Hyperliquid. So obviously that's not great on it. You'd want to see the revenue increasing over time. However, obviously the market's nuked after January because of all the tariffs and blah, blah, blah. So markets nuked massively, but the revenue's only dropped 25%. So I think that's a good sign. It means that this revenue is somewhat sticky. So even through a horrible bear market, I don't know, like the revenue for Hyperliquid isn't going to go to zero. I think there's always going to be a nice amount of revenue being earned by Hyperliquid. And obviously when the markets pick up, this revenue is going to explode. So I do think, you know, this is somewhat like recession proof. If there was a stock that was recession proof, but like a coin version of that, maybe Hyperliquid would be a good bet for that. So for myself personally, am I buying Hyperliquid? At $20, it's like one of my main plays at the moment is Hyperliquid. So I'm not buying super heavy at $20 because, you know, I'm pretty over allocated to crypto anyway. I don't have much cash to be buying. So instead, I'm just going hard on the farming of Hyperliquid, and I think that's a good strategy. If it drops back into, you know, the teens and the low teens, yeah, I'll be adding again at those prices for sure. If we get back down there. As we can see, the EVM is taking off. We can see the Hyperliquid NFTs, so you can go to drip top trade. Here you can buy and sell some NFTs. This is probably a good way to start farming. You can buy some shitty NFTs or good NFTs, hopefully. Trade them, try and, you know, get in and out. Just click a few buttons. Don't make yourself look like a bot, but, you know, invest in some things if you want. Like obviously this is risky. NFTs are not really a narrative in this cycle at all, but, you know, potentially, like the idea is if the Hyperliquid airdrop more heavily rewards people who are trading on chain on the Hyperliquid EVM, then those people who are trading on chain on the Hyperliquid EVM are going to have more money, so they're potentially going to be buying the memes and the NFTs on the Hyperliquid chain, because obviously they're already there, they already have their money there, and they're very much involved in that ecosystem. So you could see this as a little bit of a speculative investment. I would probably, if you think that would happen, I'd probably sell on whenever that airdrop does happen. At some point in this year is when I assume, probably in like Q3, Q4 kind of time frame. I probably sell once they start popping off, once the airdrop happens. So it could be an investment idea, but yeah, obviously also quite risky and could go down in the interim. So you can buy some memes. So every day, every few days, however much free time you have, go into Hyperliquid EVM is what I'm doing. Do whatever you like, but what I'm doing, going onto the Hyperliquid EVM and clicking some buttons. For example, I will buy some Buddy meme coin on Kittenswap or on Hyperswap. And I think like this is one of the top memes on Hyperliquid. Like I said, if there is a big airdrop for people using the EVM chain, a lot of these memes are going to go up, in my opinion. And this is like a $10 million market cap, just over 10 million. Like that is fucking tiny. That's such a tiny market cap. That's like a failed meme on Solana, and Hyperliquid's going to be, in my opinion, one of the big narratives or one of the big chains of the next cycle. Or even if this cycle continues, it's going to be one of the big chains that people are using potentially. So you could invest, not financial advice, small amount into some of the memes if they ever pop off. Like they're pretty low in my opinion. Probably the same with the NFTs. Obviously the safest one is the wealthy hippie babies. I think the last time we were talking about them, they were like 150 hype, now they're 200. So I'm not buying one at this price because yeah, the NFTs are kind of going up a lot the last couple of days. So I'm not buying in right now, but just ones to keep an eye on. I think the Mecha Cats, they are tied to Kittenswap. So if you trade on Kittenswap, if you provide liquidity on Kittenswap, which is what I'm doing, and if you want a deeper dive into that, you can watch my farming video on Hyperliquid. But you get a boost in your points if you own one of these Mecha Cats, and then you get a bigger portion of the airdrop when you do get that airdrop. So in conclusion, where do I think the price of Hyperliquid is going to go? Well, I have no idea, but we can look at some comparisons. So the most obvious comparison is the BNB coin. This is somewhat tied to the revenue of Binance, but it's not really. But there are certain mechanisms that if the Binance chain makes money, it goes back to buying the BNB token. And you see over the last couple of cycles, BNB has always been in the top 5 or top 10, like one of the behemoths in crypto. What is it there? $90 billion fully diluted market cap. If we compare Hyperliquid to that, Hyperliquid's fully diluted market cap is 20 billion, which is 4.5 times smaller than Binance, and the circulating market cap is 13 times smaller than Binance. So that's like the most obvious comparison. However, that's just the BNB token. Like that's not taking in like the earnings that BNB makes on its Perps platform doesn't really go into the valuation of BNB. That would kind of go more into the Binance valuation of the actual company. So that's a separate thing. So that's probably worth like 100 billion by itself. So just as a comparison, Binance, the actual company, is probably worth somewhere in the neighborhood of like 60 to 100 billion. Coinbase right now is valued at 50 billion. So, and it's been much higher previously. Now, is Hyperliquid ever going to be Coinbase or Binance? I suppose that's kind of what they're going after, but maybe it's a bit like they're kind of different companies, so it's kind of unfair to value them like that. But even still, stuff like Solana's worth what, 50 billion, Ethereum's worth a couple of 100 billion. So, and they have both been much higher previously. So that's just kind of, and like Hyperliquid's what, 7 billion, 6 billion, 5 billion, depending on the day. So you can see there is a lot of room to grow for Hyperliquid. Now, is it going to go 100x? No, but I do think it's probably one of the safer things you can invest in. And if you're not using Hyperliquid yet, you don't trade perps, that's fine, but you could potentially try out the EVM. I have a referral link in the description to sign up to Hyperliquid. It's not really going to make me any money if you do sign up, but you might as well, if you want to support me, make a couple of cents potentially. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Hope you learned something, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.